I'm Any New Province, and this week we find out if Voltaic Servant is possibly Pauper playable. While I didn't mention Voltaic Servant in my set review, this card has me incredibly excited. Its unique effect had me scouring all of the common artifacts to see which ones would be most powerful if I could untap them just one extra time each turn. Ghoul Caller's Bell was one of the first cards I considered with Voltaic Servant. I thought maybe putting it in a deck with Thought Picker, which could create a really interesting mill lantern sort of archetype. I was almost satisfied with that deck, but I think Lantern Control and Pauper needs just a couple more things to go over the top and become a viable archetype. We'll definitely need Orcish Spy to be fixed because it's still bugged on Moto, and I also think we need a little bit more powerful hand disruption to get all the way there. Another great Pauper deck builder, Links to the Past, aka R&D Function, mentioned that maybe we could make a Mirror Land Shaper deck. We could use Mirror Land Shaper to turn our opponent's lands into artifacts and then repeatedly blow them up with a Gorilla Shaman. The reason I couldn't play that deck is because I couldn't conceptualize how the rest of the 75 would look. Mirror Land Shaper plus Gorilla Shaman plus Voltaic Servant is an awesome combo, and I really hope someone fleshes it out and gives it a try. Instead, I chose another artifact that piqued my interest. This is Walking Atlas. It costs 2, it's a 1/1, and it says, tap, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Even though this card is only a 1/1, I thought something powerful had to be going on here. Land drops are one of the fundamental rules of Magic the Gathering as a game. If we can get a Walking Atlas down and start making multiple land drops a turn with our Voltaic Servant, then we have to be able to do something broken. That's how I came upon this deck, which is my proof of concept for the Pauper version of the Legacy archetype, lands. I'm going to start this deck a little bit differently. I know I usually go over the mana base last, but I want to tell you about these sweet lands first. First we have Haunted Fengraf. It taps for 1 colorless mana, or we can pay 3 and sacrifice it to return a creature card at random from our graveyard to our hand. It's great that we can get back creatures from our graveyard if our opponent disrupts them somehow, because we are a combo deck. We need a lot of pieces to go right. The great thing about our deck is that it doesn't matter if we get a creature back at random. All of our creatures can interact with our lands in a profitable way. Next is Colony Garden. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, we create a 0/1 plant creature token. When it becomes untapped, we can tap it for green mana. Colony Garden is great for soaking up edicts, but if we can recur this a few times, we can get infinite chump blockers or provide a way for us to pay convoke costs for other spells in our deck. A deck this slow needs a way to make it into the late game to do its extra powerful things. That's why Radiant Fountain is so crucial here. Radiant Fountain enters the battlefield and gains us 2 life and can also tap for colorless mana. If you can continuously gain 2 life off this, you can get ahead of your opponent's burn spells in no time. We're also running 1 artifact land of each of our colors. We have Seed of the Synod and Tree of Tales. We have 1 of each of the artifact lands because in the late game sometimes we just need a bunch of extra mana at instant speed. We can go tutor these out somehow and untap them repeatedly with our Voltaic Servants. Sajiri Step is a little bit awkward in this deck because it taps for white mana. We don't have any white cards in our main board, but it does allow us to put some powerful white cards in our sideboard. Sajiri Step also works perfectly for a lands deck in the way that it interacts with our opponent. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, target creature I control gains protection from the color of my choice until end of turn. That'll stop our opponent from targeting our creatures with removal so that we can keep our combo moving with all of its pieces. We're also running some Karoo lands. They enter the battlefield tapped. When they enter the battlefield, we have to return a land we control to our hand, and when they become untapped, they tap for 2 mana of 2 different colors. We're okay returning lands to our hand because a lot of our lands have great enter the battlefield triggers. Selesnya Sanctuary taps for green and white, and Simic Growth Chamber taps for green and blue. This next card would be pretty bad if we didn't have some way to recur it. It's Skyline Cascade. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. We intend to trigger this ability multiple times to lock down our opponent's board so that we can win in the late game. Next, we have Sunscorched Desert. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target player. Ignore that part about planeswalkers. It taps for a colorless. We're actually going to try to recur this land enough times to have it help us win the game. Our last silver bullet tutorable land is Turntimber Grove. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. When it becomes untapped, it adds green mana. This is just a contingency plan for those main board electrickeries. If we've already used up our Sajiri Step and we can't recur it, Turntimber Gorge can be tutored out to pump up one of our creatures and save them while the rest of the X1s die. Okay, that's a ton of 1-of lands, so how are we going to find all of them? Well, first we have Preordain, one of the most powerful card filtering spells in the Pauper format. It costs 1 blue, it says scry 2, then draw a card. We're also running expedition maps. It costs 1 mana, you can pay 2, tap it, and sacrifice it to search your library for any of those one-of land cards, reveal it, and then shuffle your library. This is obviously great because it lets us go find exactly the land that we need at any given time. Next, we have the most powerful land tutor in our deck. It's the most powerful because it's instant. I think a lot of the lands that we're playing were meant to only be triggered at sorcery speed. Crop rotation allows us to go around that contingency. We pay 1 green, sacrifice a land, and search our library for any land card and put it onto the battlefield. I've already explained the synergy between Walking Atlas and Voltaic Servant. While it's probably good with most of the land cards we have in our deck, we can make it even better by picking those lands up and playing them again. That's why I've included Oboro Breeze Caller. It's a 2 mana 1/1 flyer that lets you pay 2, return a land you control to your hand and untap target land, so it kind of simulates a little bit of ramp at the same time. Jaughty Offshoot isn't necessary for the combo, but I've included it with these creatures because it really helps us continue to survive while we're trying to kill our opponent with something like a Sunscorched Desert. Jaughty Offshoot costs 1 green, it's an 0/3 with Defender, and it says, Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Our combo isn't super consistent, that's why I've included a way to tutor up any one of the pieces we might need at a given time. This is Muddle the Mixture. It costs blue, and its effect is counter target instant or sorcery spell, which will help us push through pieces if that's what we need to use it for. The most important part about it is that it has the transmutability as well. It costs 1 blue, you can discard this card, search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. We can only transmute as a sorcery, but that's not a big deal because we're usually transmuting for creatures, which we're just going to chuck on the battlefield. My Discord tipped me off on this next card. I needed a mana sink and I also had a way to tutor for it. It seemed like a perfect fit. This is Sprout Swarm. It costs 1 and a green. It's an instant with Convoke, which means your creatures may help you cast this spell. Each creature you tap while casting the spell pays for 1 or 1 mana of that creature's color. It also has buyback too, so we can do it multiple times. You may pay an additional 3 mana as you cast this spell. If you do, put this card into your hand as it resolves. After all of that, its effect is create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. The rest of our deck is made up of cards that only synergize with the lands theme in a kind of tertiary way, but it's an incredibly powerful late game engine, and I think it's the best way to top out this curve. First is Mnemonic Wall, which costs 4 and a blue for an 0/4 Defender. When it enters the battlefield, we return an instant or sorcery card from our graveyard to our hand. We can return any of the instants or sorceries I've gone over so far, but there's a few more compelling options for us. Pulse of Marasa is our first wall target. It costs 2 and a green, it's an instant, and it says, return target creature or land card from a graveyard to its owner's hand. You gain 6 life. Especially with Evolving Wilds and Jaughty Offshoot, this is a massive life swing, but it will also help us recur any other lands that happen to go to our graveyard during the run of a game. We also have the quintessential Mnemonic Wall combo with Ghostly Flicker. It costs 2 and a blue, it's an instant, and it says, exile 2 target artifacts, creatures, and or lands you control, then return those cards to the battlefield under your control. That means for every 3 mana we manage to get on the battlefield, we can recur one of our special lands with our Mnemonic Wall and Ghostly Flicker. Our last card doesn't combo with Mnemonic Wall, but it does go along really well with all of our other untapping shenanigans. This is Viridian Longbow. It costs 1 generic mana, and a creature that is equipped with the Viridian Longbow has this creature deals 1 damage to any target. You equip it to a creature with 3 generic mana. Okay, let's have a look at this sideboard. First, we have Circle of Protection Green, which costs 1 and a white and says the next time a green source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage. You can pay 1 white to have that happen. We have Standard Bearer, which our opponent has to target with their first removal spell or aura every turn, or actually every aura they cast. We have 3 Hydroblasts for really nailing down that burn matchup. We have 3 Gleeful Sabotages. We can use our Colony Garden tokens to conspire it and blow up a bunch of artifacts. We have 2 Moment's Peace for all of those Tireless Tribe matchups, or is it Blitz matchups? Maybe somebody's trying to Temur Battle Rage and ATOG or something. We can use this there. We have 2 Relic of Progenitus for nuking the graveyards and taking down our Tron opponents, and we have 2 Spider Silk Armors so that our 1/1s can reach up and grab those Delvers out of the air. Notably, there's a lot of Silver Bullets at 2 mana here so that we can tutor them up with Muddle the Mixture at just the right time. And there you have it, my first shot at the Pauper lands archetype. We're going to take this deck live into a league at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Atlantic time. We're there every Tuesday night at that time playing possibly Pauper playable decks. Before I go, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Tuesday night.